Let's play Tag 'em or Bag 'em. This Tag 'em or Bag 'em segment is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. I'm going to give you guys a name, and you can tell me whether you would tag them if you were the GM of the team, whether you think the team will tag them, or whether you'd bag them and let them walk. We'll start in Jacksonville with Trent Baalke, lover of long arms and hater of Jim Harbaugh. The Jaguars and Chargers get to play this year. That'd be great. Josh Allen, linebacker, outside linebacker, pass rusher, edge guy. Josh Allen, former first-round pick. Sully, would you tag him?
I think it's a no doubt he gets tagged. I think it's clear cut. I mean, you just referenced it. The front office said as much at the end of the season. They're like, we expect Josh Allen, or they said something even more definitive, like Josh Allen will be a Jaguar in 2024. So it's, that seems pretty legit. He's coming off of a career year. He had this franchise record in sacks, 90 pressures. I mean, the dude was one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. You don't let those guys go to market because it's almost impossible to retain them. It's a very, this might be one of the easier tags or at least decisions for Jacksonville. They can't lose a guy like this.
Yeah, especially with all their questions on both sides of the ball, really, is that I don't know how much homegrown talent Jacksonville has, but Josh Allen is absolutely one of them. And he is coming off a season, as Tyler said, not just a career season, but we're talking about a guy who finished second in the NFL in sacks. He was just a bully this year. This was by far his best season, and there's no way. And if you think, hey, look, what if he regresses to year 2 or year 3? That's an argument for the franchise tag, because if you sign to a long-term deal, then you're stuck. You say, all right, let's see if he can do this for one more year, and then we'll go from there. So, yeah, I think this one's a no-brainer. I think Jacksonville has to franchise tag him.
And not only that, real quickly, as much as you say how great he is, they need him for more ways than just keeping a homegrown talent. We always joke about the AFC South not being that competitive. It's about to flip over these next few years with CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson coming back. You need to disrupt these quarterbacks, and a guy like Josh Allen can help you do that.
Yeah, agree completely. And I mean, AFC South looks like to be much better. You also have the issue too. Brian Burns in the 2019 draft class is a first-round pick. We'll talk about him in a second. Actually, we just go ahead and mention him as well, because I think the Panthers may be less likely to tag him than the Jaguars are to tag Josh Allen. Like, the Josh Allen thing's just done. It's a done deal. I would expect Brian Burns is getting tagged. I would not be shocked if the Panthers used the non-exclusive tag and allowed teams to negotiate with him. Or, it should also be noted, we've seen this. Frank Clark, I think there's another example too, where you can tag a guy with the exclusive tag and just trade it. And that happens all the time. Edge rusher salaries currently, I mean, Nick Bosa just broke the market up to $34 million per year. But you look at TJ Watt, 28, Joey Bosa, 27, Myles Garrett, 25, Montez Sweat, Rashawn Gary, 24, Max Crosby, 23.5, Khalil Mack, 23.5, Bradley Chubb, 22. It's like you have to both Josh Allen and Brian Burns are going to command in that upper echelon, not the Nick Bosa number, but like in that upper echelon of contract. And so that's a lot to give out for guys who've been inconsistent. I assume you guys would also be tagging Brian Burns.
Yeah, I think that's the thing though. Yes, because of the player and because of the talent, but where this team is right now,
yeah, I agree completely.
Does it make sense for them to really invest that much into that player, or is he a great, like you were mentioning, tag and trade? Or
tag and trade seems like it makes the most sense, because this team has so many holes on their roster that you want to fill it, but you also do not want to let Brian Burns just walk away in free agency and get nothing in return. So I think at the minimum, if you are thinking about letting him walk, that you call up teams like, look, we're going to tag him. Do you want him?
Brian Burns, by the way, also just 25 years old at the end of his rookie deal, because he was drafted at the age of 21. Josh Allen, 26. I mean, but that's the thing is, like, if you're the Jaguars and you have Trevor Lawrence and you feel like you've got a team that made the playoffs last year, you probably want to work towards a long-term deal, because you want this guy in his prime over these next few years if you think you can contend. I argued with my buddy Adam Gold on 99.9, the fan in Raleigh on Monday, that like Carolina's better off tagging Burns and trading him and getting a first-round pick, because this is not a team that is built to compete for the next 2 years, I don't think. So, I just think you're better off getting assets, even for a guy that, you signed to a big deal you'd have through his, age 29 season. All right. Next, we head to Breachtown. I'm guessing, John Breach, that you would not let T. Higgins walk out the door. My favorite fact about T. Higgins is that he was the first person drafted after Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like Andy Reid, come on, man. That would have imagine T. Higgins on that offense with Patrick Mahomes, but you won't be doing that because you'll be imagining T. Higgins tagged on the Cincinnati Bengals, right, Breach?
That is correct. I think that is the only move that makes sense. Look, the wide receiver tag isn't a huge number. We have the estimate, right around 20.7 million. It might go up a little depending on what the salary cap ends up being, but I think they have to. T. Higgins has been so productive. I mean, he has made some phenomenal catches, and I understand why he doesn't want to be tagged because I'm sure he would love to either get paid like a number one receiver or go to another team and prove that he can be a number one receiver. But if you're the Bengals, you have Jamar Chase at a very low rate for this upcoming season in 2024, and paying T. Higgins $20 million for the upcoming season isn't going to break the bank. You have a lot of salary cap money. I think the Bengals have the fourth or fifth most available cap space going into free agencies. So I absolutely do whatever is necessary to keep T. Higgins. And if that means franchise tagging him, then do it.
Yeah, I would say keep him for sure. I mean, he's definitely someone that, this team, I know they almost kind of are getting, underlooked as to how much they could legitimately be in the Super Bowl conversation next year. And I know that you have to pay, obviously the Burrow money's coming in, you have to pay Jamar Chase, but this is a team that could very easily be in the Super Bowl next year. And I don't think that they should be in the business of losing players. Now, if you don't want to sign him to a long-term deal, I could kind of get that. But for 2024, I definitely keep this guy aboard to see what the heights of this franchise could be.
Here's the thing: if you don't keep T. Higgins, if you don't tag T. Higgins or sign him to a deal, Tyler Boyd's a free agent, and after that, it's Andre Ivosivas and Tridden Irwin behind him, along with Charlie Jones. Apologies to Andre for probably butchering his name. Jamar Chase is a special player, elite talent. He's been a little banged up the last couple of years. You let T. Higgins walk, Jamar Chase gets hurt, you have Joe Burrow throwing to nobody. I don't see how they can possibly let him walk. And frankly, I think they have to figure out a way to get him under a contract. It's going to be like $23 million a year, and you're going to have to pay Jamar Chase Jamar Chase is going to get the biggest wide receiver contract. The issue for these teams and these wide receivers, and we'll talk about a couple more in a second, is that when Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams were traded, they were adamant. Their agents were adamant, or they were adamant, or somebody was adamant that no matter what, and the same thing with DeAndre Hopkins when he was traded to originally to the Cardinals, they wanted to be the top paid wide receiver by some metric. And they didn't care how they got there, if it was funny money, whatever it was, they just wanted to be saying, I'm the top paid wide receiver. So they get traded and they have these contracts where Tyreek Hill gets $30 million a year and Devontae Adams gets $28 million a year. But if you look at the total guaranteed and the fully guaranteed numbers, it's just not up there. Now they're probably going to end up collecting all the money, but the market has not regressed back to the level that I think a lot of NFL teams thought. And so T. Higgins is going to want $26 million a year. He's not going to take $22 or $23 million a year. And I think that's the problem with these long-term contracts. Brandon Ayuk, another guy, but it's just going to be really hard to convince these wide receivers to say, take less on your average annual salary, even though you're getting more guaranteed because of those inflated top-end contracts. Next up, Giants running back, Saquon Barkley. Bag him or tag him, Sully?
I don't know if I tag him. I think I let him. I think I bag him. I don't know if this team is a Saquon Barkley tag away from competing in the NFC East. I don't know if, as much as he's meant to the franchise, and I get all of those angles to why you would want to keep him around. I don't know if he'd be happy on the tag. So if you tag him and that's all you want to do, I don't know if that really.
I can tell you he would not be happy on the tag.
Right, exactly. So you it's not like, but it's a great point. It's not like you can just say, oh, he's tagged, he'll be totally fine with it. Sometimes with these players, you tag them and they're pissed about it. They don't want this at all. And you're almost creating a volatile situation. As much as you want to keep the player, you only want to keep them at a certain number and they don't like the number. Sometimes it's just not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And for Barkley, I just don't know if this is one of those situations where you can tag him and ultimately hope to keep him in 2024. I think it might be a maybe tag and trade at best.
Yeah, it feels like this relationship has kind of run its course. It seems like he was frustrated and look, his tag number is also going to be higher than whatever the standard running back tag is going to be, because he's going to get 20% increase on his salary from last season. So he's going to make over $12 million if you hit him with the franchise tag. And it does feel like it would be better for both sides to just kind of move on. It's not just Saquon Barkley or just the Giants. It just seems like both sides would almost prefer that. And I think the New York Post actually reported on today, Tuesday, that it's unlikely that Barkley gets the tag. So it seems like that's the way they're leaning. He's dealt with a few injury issues, and maybe if you're the Giants, you don't want to deal with that anymore. So yeah, I'd probably do not tag him.
Yeah, I think the only reason this is even a conversation, honestly, because the tag would be $12 million. It would put him, he would be the fourth-ish highest paid running back, either the third, fourth or fifth highest paid running back by McCaffrey, Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, and Nick Chubb, right above Josh Jacobs, friend of the pod, Josh Jacobs, who got the tag last year, assuming he didn't get tagged again. And it's like ownership loves him. It's the only reason they view him as the face of the franchise, this New York athlete. And it's the only reason that he is even in consideration for this tag, because otherwise you wouldn't allocate $12 million of your salary cap, even if it's going to be $250 million. Like, you still wouldn't want to do it for a running back who's been injured, is going to be unhappy on that tag, and is going to leave after next year anyway. So I think, maybe it's a situation where you don't tag him, let him go test the market, see what he can get. If the market's really soft, and it usually is with these running backs, especially when you got like Derrick Henry's going to be out there, it's not an easy market. Maybe he comes back and signs a lesser deal with the Giants that, everybody can sort of save a little face. I think that's probably the best outcome there. Said to New England, Sully. Also North Carolina, technically. Lenore Ryan, the man drafted by Nike, the dog, Bill Belichick's dog. Patriots safety, Kyle Duggar, during the COVID draft, maybe the greatest draft moment of all time. You tagging Kyle Duggar?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's someone that is good for the system, familiar obviously with Gerard Mayo. I think that he's someone you try to emphasize to keep around a relatively, decent number for safeties. And he's played extremely well, versatile, can play, cover safeties, can work in the backfield, in the back end in the secondary. I just feel like he's somebody who could potentially develop into that leadership role as well. I mean, we're just talking about Matt Slater. I think that he's somebody that could eventually, not only for his contributions on the field, but also from a locker room standpoint, I think he buys into a lot of what Gerard Mayo is selling. And for a first-year head coach, you need to have as many guys in your corner as humanly possible. And I think Duggar could be one of them. And this team is going to be led by their defense. They might have a young quarterback, but they're going to be a defensive-minded team. And so if you can have a playmaker like Duggar, I think that makes a lot of sense for them. And they have a ton of money to burn.
Yeah. And it's always point. Look, if you're Mayo, you don't want to be going. You already have a guy who understands the defense. He's familiar. This is not going to be a huge scheming difference from what Belichick's doing. And you want these guys that already know your system around. And you have someone who is just kind of a chess piece who you can put anywhere. I think this one makes sense.
Be the fourth highest paid safety, I think, because the number is $16.258 million. That would actually put him above Jesse Bates, behind only Derwin James, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Jamal Adams, who I think is probably getting cuts. So maybe the third highest paid safety. This is really one, I think, that with the new head coach, young player, versatile, fits in the scheme, was on the Mayo defense, would make a lot of sense to actually figure out a way to get a deal done. And like you said, they got tons of cap space, so not a huge problem there. Have you heard anything, Sully, about that, like a possible deal for?
No, I think that you're right. I think that there's probably a handful of guys the Patriots want to retain. He's certainly one of them. I think Michael Wenner's another one. Hunter Henry's another one. This is a team in transition. He's young enough that you could start to kind of build these pieces with. He could be one of the leaders on defense. I just think that this makes a lot of sense, not only as a tag, but as you mentioned, as an extension as well.
Man, that's a lot. It's a lot for a safety. All right. Anyway, moving on.
Safeties aren't cheap, Brenton.
Safeties aren't cheap. And look what Jesse Bates did to that defense for the Atlanta Falcons this year. All right, Ravens. That's just a big old shot at you, Breach. Ravens defensive tackle Justin Madubuike. Fun name unnamed to say, what an amazing year for him. This is a guy that if he's not franchise tagged, you can guess where every single person on the planet who covers the NFL is going to predict where he might be signing in 2024, the offseason, because his old DC, Mike McDonald, now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Bag it or tag it, Breach.
Yeah, if I'm the Ravens, I absolutely tag him. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, as a defensive tackle, we see some big numbers from the pass rushers, but look, to me, this one's another no-brainer. I mean, you're talking about a guy who had 13 sacks and just kind of transformed what the defense was able to do. And I'm sure Mike McDonald will be the first person on the phone, as you mentioned, Brinson, if the Ravens didn't pull the trigger on the franchise tag. And I know the Ravens probably know that. So they're thinking, if we don't want to lose them, we don't have much of a choice here. So it's really crazy what he has done since his rookie year, when he wasn't even a full-time starter. So you're talking about from season 1 in 2020 to season 4 in 2023. And he's just become this force that is a key part of the Ravens defense.
26 years old, was just an absolute stud for them. And if you're a Ravens team, you were right there to get to the Super Bowl. And a lot of that was because of your defense. I know that obviously Lamar won MVP, but the calling card for this Ravens team was their defense. You mentioned it. They lost their defensive coordinator. And as we've seen over the last few years, when you lose those coordinators, it's a huge deal sometimes. And so if you want stability, if you want to keep this team and firing on all cylinders on that side of the ball, you try to keep as many playmakers as possible. This dude, again, 26 years old, it's a no-brainer.
13 sacks last year after having 8.5 combined in his first 3 seasons with Baltimore. His first 3 seasons, he also had 16 quarterback hits. Last year, he had 33. I mean, that is ridiculous. Tackles for loss numbers, 12. This is a guy that puts against a ton of pressure. And I would think that you could tag him and sign him to a long-term deal that is sort of below market, because even though the numbers are there and the production is there, it is just a single year, and he is not on the radar of your average. Like, I know that doesn't necessarily matter as much when you're talking contracts, but he's just not on the radar as like an elite, a defensive pressure guy. So I think there's a decent chance to make a move there, and you get the cheaper tag at defensive tackle. I don't know, defensive tackle is more this year. 20.986 versus 20.247 for defensive end. That's kind of rare. Interesting to note there. All right, next up, bag or tag Buccaneers. Actually, we can just go across the board on the Buccaneers. Antoine Winfield, safety. Baker Mayfield, quarterback. And then Mike Evans you can include, although there's some weird stipulation with Mike Evans getting tagged where it would be like really high, for like higher than the average wide receiver tag. So what do you think here, Breach? How do you handle the Bucks, and do you have that Mike Evans stipulation offhand? So I don't have to Google it really fast.
It is insane. Well, so you're not tagging Mike Evans because his tag would be phenomenally high because of what his cap hit was last year. So I think the tag would be over $28 million, which is way higher than the receiver tag, which will be about $20.7 million, which we mentioned earlier. But with Antoine Winfield, I think the Tampa Bay Times actually reported today that the Buccaneers would, if they tag someone, it would probably be Winfield, which I still think is interesting, because if you think it really says to either they think they're confident they can get a deal done with Baker Mayfield, or they just aren't completely sold on Mayfield, despite the fact that he just had this huge season. So that this is a tough one. I think that I probably do, because you don't want to kick the can with Baker Mayfield. I think that maybe you sign him to like a 2 or 3 year deal. I mean, if he's asking for $50 million, maybe you tag him. So I don't even know. I'm glad I don't run the Buccaneers front office, but I think I would probably tag Winfield over Mayfield. That's where I was going with that. That's the field I'm in.
I think this is one of those things that we saw in New York last year, right? Where it was, are they going to be able to tag Saquon because they got Daniel Jones under contract? Can they kind of swoop in under the rug, kind of get that thing done quickly? I think you kind of go into that same kind of mode here with Tampa Bay. I would be prone to do everything I can to keep the quarterback, especially if you feel like he's a guy that you can have for the next few years, like you were saying, Breach. But I also look at Antoine Winfield, and anytime I turn the Bucks on this year, this dude was making plays. I mean, he was not only just piling up stats. I think he had like 6 sacks. I think he led the league in forced fumbles, or was tied for the lead in forced fumbles. He was a key anchor for them defensively, and so I kind of lean on keeping him. But again, I don't know how you can look into the abyss at quarterback and just say, all right, let's see what happens. Because if you're Baker Mayfield, like, I know that you had a successful season in Tampa Bay, but you're not going to look around after that great year and see if Atlanta will pay you more.
Coordinator's gone too.
Exactly.
Alice is in Charlotte with the Panthers now.
And you might be losing Mike Evans. We don't know what's going to happen with him. So there's a lot of variables there.
I'm with you. I think that I agree with you. I think I agree completely. The Bucks have to be thinking quarterback is more important than anything. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, Antoine Winfield is a guy you drafted who is a key player for that defense and a superstar. Can you you'd love to hammer out a deal with him. But it also sounds like, I know there's like some rumor about Baker going to the Patriots, or like the Patriots swooping in and stealing Baker. And I don't really buy that. I don't know.
I don't know if that happens. I think, I think that there's a scenario where go veteran.
Mike Florio is having himself an offseason so far.
Sure.
Yes. Like, does the NFL have an age discrimination issue? He's like, Baker needs to go to the Patriots. It's like, this feels like, it's like, what is Florio going to be firing off in July? This is what he's shooting off in February. My God, we're going to get some insane quarterback trade rumor from Florio at the combine. He's on a heater right now when it comes to
Brady and Belichick reuniting with the Panthers. That's
right. But I think that it does feel like, contrary to that report, that Baker wants to be in Tampa Bay, that he likes the setup there. He had success in his first year there. I think he and Jason Light, the GM, get along. So I would say tag Antoine Winfield and play chicken with Baker personally, just because a lot of the teams who are quarterback needy are high in the draft and probably going to be making picks. And maybe, I don't think you're going to have a ton of competition for Baker as previously thought. All right, last one. Dolphins. Christian Wilkins. Stud out of Clemson. Tagging or bagging, Breach.
So this is the only decision I am going to make based fully on the team's salary cap situation. You look at where the Dolphins are right now. They are so far over the cap that is almost laughable. They're more than $50 million over the salary cap. They have to have everything in order by the time free agency starts on March 13th. And if you tag Wilkins, you have to be able to fit his entire salary under your cap. So that's going to knock you up to 74, 75 million that you got to get figured out. I do know that, look, you can restructure contracts and get that number down, but this just makes it incredibly difficult. So I think if you're the Dolphins, you work as hard as you can to get a multi-year deal done. And if it doesn't happen, you say, look, man, we love you, but we got to let you walk because this just doesn't make sense for us.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen there. I think that's the situation that they find themselves in just because of their cap constraints. Ultimately, I think that he might be one of the biggest beneficiaries of not being tagged, because we're going to see the likes of, like we were just saying, we think Matabike is going to get tagged. Chris Jones is probably going to stay in Kansas City. A lot of these defensive tackles are not going to make it to market. He might be the top dude on there and really catch a bag, which is great because he's a Massachusetts.
He might be the best available free agent in the league if he doesn't get tagged. Christian Wilkins is a star, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least I think he is. 9 sacks last year. Good time to do it. He is 28, but I mean, still, he would get a bag.
We'll know if he's the best free agent in the league, because I think Prisco has his top 100 free agents coming out tomorrow on Wednesday.
Never even heard of that guy, Prisco. I do think it's worth noting too here. So if the Dolphins tagged him and they were still trying to figure out their salary cap thing, he could wait until the last minute to sign it. And if the new league year began and he hadn't signed his tag, and so it wasn't, although I guess it's actually technically, if they've tagged you, it still applies to the salary cap, even if he hadn't signed it. So there's a situation where they might have to rescind the tag if they were over it, if they couldn't come into a deal. So yeah, I mean, that's good for Christian Wilkins. That could equal getting paid. All right, that's it for Tag Talk. Take a break. When we come back, lessons learned from 2023 next.